Omicron variant. President Joe Biden describes America's response to the new COVID-19 threat. Capitol Hill calendar. The pressing issues lawmakers must decide in the coming weeks. Nuclear deal. The world wrestles with Iran's ambitions and how to keep the country in check. And pro-life rally. How people are standing up for the unborn in Spain. On EWTN News Nightly for Monday, November 29th, 2021. Well, thank you so much for being with us tonight. I'm Tracy Sable. President Joe Biden responds to the newly identified COVID-19 variant, Omicron. He says it is a cause for concern, not a cause for panic. Still, he urges people to get vaccinated. White House correspondent Owen Jensen reports. Owen?
As the world learns more about Omicron and its potential danger, President Biden tonight is urging Americans to get their booster shots. This as he implements new travel bans.
In a scene repeated time and again in his first year in office, President Joe Biden implores Americans to get vaccinated against COVID-19.
The best protection, I know you're tired of hearing me say this, the best protection against this new variant or any of the variants out there, the ones we've been dealing with already, is getting fully vaccinated.
With the Delta variant still doing damage, now enter Omicron, identified just days ago in South Africa.
I want to reiterate, Dr. Fauci believes that the current vaccines provide at least some protection against the new variant, and the boosters strengthen that protection significantly.
The president added,
"We do not yet believe that additional measures will be needed."
Now nations trying to keep Omicron at bay, installing travel bans. The U.S. is restricting visitors from more than a half dozen countries, including Botswana, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Meanwhile, in Vienna, Austria, efforts to keep Iran from getting a nuclear bomb. Negotiators from Iran, Russia, China, France, Germany, and Britain all meeting together.
Under President Donald Trump, the U.S. pulled out of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which he called horrible and one-sided. And right now, the U.S. is not directly involved in the negotiations taking place in Vienna.
Iran wants sanctions lifted. For now, it's enriching small amounts of uranium, but claims its atomic program is peaceful. And in the White House press briefing room today,
our objective has not changed. It remains a mutual return to full compliance with the JCPOA. This is the best available option to restrict Iran's nuclear program and provide a platform to address Iran's destabilizing conduct.
Also tonight, as the Christmas season gets underway, President Biden met with various CEOs today, including from Walmart and from Food Line, and he told them later this week he's going to lay out a detailed strategy to fight the new variant that does not include any lockdowns or shutdowns. At the White House, Owen Jensen, EWTN News Nightly.
Well, U.S. lawmakers return to Capitol Hill bracing for a hectic end of the year. They face a pileup of bills that could drag their session into the holidays. Republicans and Democrats are working to try to break the backlog. Capitol Hill correspondent Eric Rosales has more.
Congress has only 10 scheduled days left to finish a laundry list of must-pass bills before they're scheduled to leave for holiday recess on December 13th.
It's a huge agenda. We have funding the government, we have debt limit, we have BBB, and we have the defense bill. That's a huge agenda for December and the end of November, but we aim to get it all done.
Lawmakers have until the end of the week to keep the government open and avoid a shutdown. Republicans see another stopgap measure.
I think we're looking at a continuing resolution into potentially sometime next year if we can't agree on these provisions that have always been carried on a bipartisan basis in the government funding bills.
Sources tell me they will likely pass another temporary funding bill till January 21st. As for funding our military,
we have a very strong bipartisan National Defense Authorization Act. It passed our committee with a vote of 23-3.
As senators work through several amendments, they hope to vote on the NDAA this week. And the Build Back Better Act, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer hasn't set a date on when he plans to bring it to the floor. Right now, Democrats want several changes, including state and local tax deduction caps, climate change programs, and Medicare expansion. Republicans say pro-life provisions are a must.
The Hyde Amendment has been in the appropriations bill now for 45 years. We need to get realistic about what has to be in the bill, and then we have to get realistic about the top line numbers.
Republicans say more spending will lead to more inflation.
What they're talking about with this reckless tax and spending spree is flooding the zone with even more spending, more dollars, chasing too few goods, leading to more and higher inflation.
The Majority Leader has put the Senate on notice to expect long nights and even weekend sessions to finish their work on time. At the Capitol, Eric Rosales, EWTN News Nightly.
And joining us now is Dennis Ross, Director of the American Center for Political Leadership at Southeastern University and former Congressman. Representative Ross, great to see you again. As you know, Congress has quite the to-do list to tackle in the next 10 days. How much of it do you think they can actually accomplish, especially in light of all the partisanship and even infighting in certain parties now?
Well, I think the first thing, which of course is the end of this week, which is the funding bill, I think a stopgap CR will probably be passed. It may go to the evening of Thursday night and then late Friday night in the Senate or the House, depending on who the last one is to have it, just because they don't really want to see the shutdown. But then 2 weeks from now, we've also got to deal with the debt ceiling. And I think that's going to be a more protracted fight. And I think that you're going to see a lot of Republicans really want to put their heels in on increasing the debt ceiling without getting something in return, whether it be a systemic plan for reducing debt and deficit or something else. Now, you look at the Build Back Better bill, what alliteration that is, but that's something that I don't know if it's going to make it by the end of this year. Joe Manchin wants to take out certain elements of that. You know, it passed the House, $2 trillion spending bill, passed in the House just before Thanksgiving. It's now in the Senate. Joe Manchin wants to take out the Paid Family Medical Leave Act. There's some human infrastructure in there that includes, pre-K, paying pre-K for universal pre-K. There's a lot of other things that I think are going to have to be and it's got to be done under reconciliation, which means that it has to be done in a certain fashion and only requires 51 votes. That's going to be tough. I don't know if that's going to make it by the end of the year. I think you will see a spending bill. Watch out for the debt ceiling. And, don't also forget that there's a resolution out there to withdraw the authorization of use of military force that was out there since 2002 or 2001 on Iraq. So that's also something that's going to be debated. It's going to be a lively 3 to 4 weeks.
Absolutely. And as we heard from Eric, the National Defense Authorization Act, that's one piece of legislation, though, that seems to have quite a bit of bipartisan support. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that, the importance of passing the NDAA?
The NDAA is always one of those must-pass bills. It is always a very bipartisan bill. You take the politics out of it to the degree that you can in Congress when you're dealing with this, because we want to make sure that we have a strong military. We want to make sure that our readiness is as best as it can be. And history has shown that the NDAAs usually pass pretty well. I don't think that one will bog down, even for political reasons. It doesn't make sense for the Republicans to want to kill it for political reasons or vice versa. I believe that the NDAA will pass. You've got some reasonable people on both sides of the aisle that will marshal this through. And as you pointed out in your preliminary comments, it passed the committee with 23-3. So that's a pretty strong indication that it'll pass both chambers.
Yeah, and something else I want to talk to you about, kind of a segue here, the Iran nuclear deal negotiations. They restarted today, and Israel's Prime Minister Naftali Bennett warned that Iran wants to end sanctions in exchange for almost nothing. I'd like to get your take on all that.
Well, it was a shame we ever got into it in the first place. And I think the sanctions do work. I think it's important that we do that. We're never going to have the access necessary to determine whether they're getting nuclear armament capabilities, and it's very frightening. I will tell you, do not discount Israel. Israel, goes back to 1986 when they took out the nuclear reactor in Iraq. And they will be there and ready to preempt anything if their intelligence shows that. I think a lot of the Mideast is relying on Israel. As you see, they've not only built relations for commerce, but they've also built relations for cultural with Arab nations. Israel has. So I think they're going to be the policemen in there right now. We have to be at the table in Vienna. We're not right now. I just don't see us in our best interest to back down. We've got to maintain the sanctions. We've got to make sure that Iran does not get nuclear armament capabilities, period.
Yeah, another thing really quickly, want to get your take on another threat that we're seeing, this new variant of the coronavirus first detected in South Africa and now making headlines. President Biden talked about it today and said it's a cause for concern but not panic. But the administration is restricting travel from South Africa and other South African nations. Representative Ross, do you think that is a smart move? And also, what type of implications do you think those travel restrictions may have?
Well, right now, I don't think those travel restrictions are going to necessarily impact the United States. But as this Omicron variant, if it continues to grow, then we'll see what happened with the Delta variant happen again. The travel restrictions will get stronger. Less people will travel. Commerce will take a downturn. I'm afraid to say this, but I think it's starting to become rather evident. This is a new normal for us. Dealing with variants of the COVID-19 virus is a new normal for us. We've got to be prepared to handle this, and we can't shut down our worlds because of it. We've got to learn how to work within it. And travel restrictions are not good, although they're necessary at first. I'm hopeful. Remain hopeful that the Omicron variant is not a significant game changer in the COVID history.
Absolutely, and I guess time will tell for that. So much more we can talk about. Unfortunately, have to leave it right there. Thank you so much, Representative Ross, for your time and analysis.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
A bishop in England says that he is shocked and saddened by a preliminary vote to approve assisted suicide. Bishop Philip Egan from Portsmouth expressed his dismay after the Channel Island of Jersey backed a proposal for euthanasia late last week. Jersey has its own government and legal system and is not considered part of the United Kingdom. The Archbishop of Paris is asking Pope Francis whether that he should remain in his post. A French media report had portrayed Archbishop Michael Aupetit as authoritarian and divisive. And further details on the story are available online at CatholicNewsAgency.com. In central Mexico, a bus carrying pilgrims to the revered sanctuary of Chama has turned into a deadly tragedy. At least 19 people were killed and more than 30 injured on Friday when a bus carrying the faithful crashed into a house in a small town en route to the site. Devotions at the sanctuary of Chama date back to the Spanish missions of the 16th century. In Spain, thousands of pro-lifers gathered in Madrid to proclaim every life matters. Yesterday's pro-life rally also called for greater funding for maternity clinics. It opposed a law legalizing euthanasia. It also denounced the government's intention to regulate conscious objections for doctors who will not perform abortions. Coming up, improving your spiritual life. Pope Francis reveals life's essential ingredient. And time of preparation, what you should know about Advent. Pope Francis says life's essential ingredient is prayer.
Vegliate, in ogni momento pregando.
At a Sunday address at the Vatican, the Holy Father said praying awakens the soul from sleep. It also helps us focus on what is most important in life. Later this week, the Holy Father travels to Cyprus and Greece. Well, yesterday marked the beginning of Advent, the 4-week journey that leads to Christmas Eve and the birth of Christ. Joining us now is Father Cristian Mendoza, professor of Catholic social doctrine at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome. Father, welcome back. Great to see you. Can you tell us a little bit more about Advent and its historical origins?
Thank you very much for today. And of course, it's my pleasure. Advent, as you know, is a word that we use because we translated it from Greek. Parousia is the Greek word to explain Adventus in Latin, that is the coming. It was not actually a Christian word. It was used in the past to welcome the emperor or one of his officials when he was coming or approaching to a region. So it means three things originally: presence, because the emperor was not there, but his laws were there; arrival, because he was coming closer; and coming, the movement of the emperor towards the people who were expecting him. That's why it's beautiful, because Advent means those three things: the coming of God, the presence of God, and the arrival of God to our lives.
Yeah, and many families put up Advent wreaths in their homes. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that tradition and its origins?
Yeah, so when we have the candle lights of the Advent, what we do is actually more than just expecting God to come. Because if we would just expect him, we would not be sure that he will come, but we know that he will come. So it's more an act of hope, and the light means what will happen in Christmas, that God is born in the middle of the world when the history was in the middle of its way towards fulfillment. So it's a beautiful tradition that we can kindle these little candles and we pray according to the weeks of Advent. And that's why families, when they turn the candles on, they can make a different prayer for the people in the family, thinking about those who passed away and thinking about those who will come in the future and do the same thing. And I think this is like breaking up a little bit of history. God comes into history from outside history. So when a family does this, it's like saying our family will always be together, because we will do this again in heaven, when we will be together, repeating what we've been doing on earth in the name of God. So it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I love that. And can you talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the ways that Advent is different from Lent?
Yeah, Lent is recalling this long time of the people of Israel in the desert, that they were walking because they were looking forward the promised land. But Lent is a moment of big penance, and they look for God, while Advent is a moment that is much closer to purgatory, because we know that God will come very soon. And we actually do penance and remain in silence because we know that he is approaching, and so we need to run faster towards him. And when you need to run faster to get to the peak of a mountain, or when you need to go and see someone you love, you just threw away everything. And that's why we do penance, because we leave behind the things that are useless to get to see God face to face. And this is the big difference. One is a big penance because we repeat this history of Israel, and the other one is like we hurry up to see the face of God, and this is Christmas.
Absolutely. Well, Father, thank you so much for speaking with us about all of this. We really appreciate it. Father Mendoza, professor of Catholic social doctrine at the Pontifical University of the Holy Cross in Rome. Thank you again, and God bless.
Thank you very much, Tracy. My pleasure.
Up next, more advice about Advent. Father Daveavanka joins us with tips to make the season special. And Christmas star. See the 5-ton symbol atop a cathedral in Spain. As Christians celebrated the beginning of Advent this weekend, we continue our discussion on this time of the liturgical year. Recently, we caught up with the head of a Catholic university in Ohio on what Advent means to him. Joining us now to share more about the importance of Advent is Father Daveavanka, president of the Franciscan University of Steubenville. Father Dave, great to see you as always. So we often hear Advent called Little Lent. Can you explain to us why that is, and also how can we better get into the spirit of Advent?
Well, thank you so much for letting me be with you, Tracy. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, as Lent is a time of preparation of 40 days, Advent is also a time of preparation. And honestly, I think, unfortunately, what we focus on is just focus on Christmas. And Advent is obviously a time of preparation for Christmas, but unfortunately, we often just skip the Advent part and we go straight to Christmas. And particularly as a Franciscan, that for Francis, the Christmas season is the greatest time, and to be able to take 4 weeks, depending on the cycle, to be able to prepare for Christmas is just really, really important. The main themes, obviously, are hope. Is that if we think about this, we are preparing our hearts for the coming of our Savior. And there's a way that we can connect with the men and women who went before us, who every year prayed, Jesus come, Jesus, or that the Lord would come. And we get to celebrate that. We get to celebrate time of preparation for Jesus' coming. So it's a time of preparation. It's a time of excitement. It's a time of penance. Lent is just such an incredibly rich season.
Yeah, and this Advent is taking place during the year of St. Joseph, the guardian of the Holy Family. How can St. Joseph serve as a role model for the faithful, especially fathers, as we prepare for Christ's birth?
Well, honestly, I think, Tracy, you said the word faithful. And for me, whenever I reflect on St. Joseph, that's really what I go to is that St. Joseph was a man who was faithful to the Lord. He was faithful to being obedient to the Lord. He was faithful to doing what the Lord wanted him to do. The other is, and it's interesting, just kind of the way the year of St. Joseph has ended. St. Joseph is such a silent figure, but with a great influence. And my concern is just over time, I think this year he's just kind of drifted away, and that's unfortunate. So the fact that you're asking the question, I think, is so important. For the father, I think lots of homes, they need the father to be able to step up. So I don't know what it looks like in particular some people's homes, but if the father can be the one who's organizing some of the time of prayer, that the father be the one that calls the family together for the Advent prayers each evening as you're lighting the candle, that be something that the children and the wife celebrate, but also that the father really plays that role, the same role that the father, St. Joseph, played, and that is forming his family, protecting and interceding for his family. So I think that engagement in the process and the journey of Advent is really important for a father as well.
Yeah, Father Dave, that's a great point. Here's something, of course, and maybe not a lot of people do know this, but St. Francis of Assisi, the founder, of course, of the Franciscan order, is credited with staging the very first nativity scene. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, it's beautiful. In a little village called Greccio, Francis was there and he was praying with the people as they were preparing for Christmas. And I'll just reiterate, for Francis, the greatest feast is Christmas. It is great as Easter is, but for him, he just couldn't imagine that God would come and take on flesh, and he was just enamored with that. So he wanted to do something special in this little village of Greccio. So what he decided to do was literally create a nativity scene with shepherds and animals, and then having a baby that would be present at this, to help people see. Everything about Francis was really incarnational, that he believed if people could see, that they may be able to understand more what God has done. Well, there's a beautiful part of that particular gentleman who was in the congregation that evening, he had this vision or this image of Jesus, and Jesus was sleeping, and nobody could wake him up. And as the story goes, Francis embraced the baby Jesus, and the baby Jesus began to wake up. And this is really the ministry of Francis, is waking up in the hearts of the people a love for Jesus. So Francis would always return back to Christmas. And he would also, just real quickly, make a relationship between Christmas and the Eucharist, that every time we celebrate Eucharist, Christ is coming to us again as we're celebrating at Christmas. So the early nativity scenes, there would be a little crib underneath the altar, but baby Jesus wouldn't be put there. And the thought is that when Jesus comes to us in the Eucharist, he fills that manger, he fills our hearts. So Francis always made a connection between Christmas and the Eucharist.
Yeah, and before I let you go, Father Dave, quickly, can you tell us what this season leading up to Christmas means for you and your Franciscan brothers?
Well, thank you. It's really, for us, it's, obviously I'm at Franciscan University, so it's a time of us, it's a little bit quieter on campus because the students, thank the Lord, are home with their families and they get to be able to spend time with their families. But we have a little nativity scene here next to the Portiuncula, which were just images that were so key to Francis. So it gives us a little bit of extra time to pray to prepare. For us, it's a time of hope. Christmas should always be. I know this has been a difficult year for so many people. For me personally, with some of the things that happened with my family, it was a difficult year. But Christmas is always a reminder that there is hope and that Jesus comes in the midst of our chaos, in the midst of the craziness that is our life and our world right now, that Jesus always breaks into that. So it's a time of us as friars, a little bit slower to be able to prepare for that.
Now, we're going to leave it right there. Father Dave, thank you so much for speaking with us today about Advent. We really appreciate it. Father Daveavanka, president of the Franciscan University of Steubenville. Thank you again, and God bless you.
Thank you so much.
And finally tonight in Barcelona, Spain, a giant Christmas star has been lifted atop the new tower of the Virgin Mary at the Basilica of Sagrada Familia. It is known as Bethlehem Star, made of glass and steel with 12 points, weighing 5 tons. It is white and blue illumination, will symbolize the cloak of the Virgin Mary. The official lighting will be December 8th. The Sagrada Familia Basilica has been under construction since 1882. And we thank you for watching tonight. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Tracy Sable. Good night and God bless.